Impact. That's what they craved. Not resolution, not truth, just something loud enough to distract from how empty it all was. They threw chairs, raised voices, made noise like it meant something, called it freedom, called it rebellion. But all I saw was choreography, loud, desperate choreography. And I didn't clap, I just tilted my head and watched. They thought they were bold, that shaking the system would shake me, that breaking rules would earn them fear or respect. But here's the thing, chaos doesn't scare someone who's already been there. I've walked through louder rooms than this, with bigger flames and fewer exits. This was theater, bad theater, and they forgot the only rule that matters in a show. Don't bore the audience. They tried to provoke. I smiled, not because I liked it, but because I'd already guessed their next 10 moves. Predictable chaos is just noise, and when noise hits someone who doesn't echo, it eats itself. That's the part they never understood. You don't defeat chaos by shouting louder. You defeat it by refusing to join the dance. They wanted chaos. I gave them calm, not peace. Calm, the kind that makes people twitch, the kind that makes noise feel like a mistake. I didn't react, I watched. I didn't attack, I understood. And that's what scared them more than any rage, the idea that I was smiling because it was already over. They screamed for a storm. I didn't give them thunder. I gave them a mirror. And when they looked into it, they didn't see power. They saw what they'd become, noise without meaning, fire without fuel. And me, I was already past it, watching from the other side, laughing, not at them, at how easy it was. They started getting louder, not because they had more to say, but because I didn't flinch. That silence, it echoed louder than anything they screamed. People like that, they don't want destruction. They want permission, permission to explode and feel justified. And when I gave them nothing, they started losing track of who the performance was even for. They called me detached, soulless, emotionless, cute words from people who rely on reaction to prove they exist. I let their noise spin out like a top, fast, chaotic, but ultimately self-defeating. Every tantrum became a monologue, every insult an audition, and I sat there, still. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I'd already outlived their storm before it started. They tried to label it passive aggression, withholding, coldness, as if I owed them warmth just because they were loud. But I wasn't cold, I was focused. Precision looks like apathy to people who only know chaos. I didn't raise my voice because I didn't need to. I was already inside their head, and I brought silence with me. One of them slammed the table, another laughed too hard at nothing. It was unraveling, slowly, then all at once. And me? I leaned back, hands folded, grin barely visible, because this wasn't new. I've seen what happens when people mistake noise for direction. They run in circles, loud ones, until the only sound left is their own exhaustion. That's the trick. You don't have to fight chaos. Just wait for it to burn itself out. Then step over the ashes, not to fix anything, just to remind them who watched it happen. The room changed before they did. It always does. Energy shifts when performance starts to rot. The jokes stopped landing. The fake tension turned real. They started noticing each other's weaknesses instead of mine. I didn't have to divide them. They broke their own rhythm trying to guess mine. They kept watching me, not because I was doing anything, but because I wasn't. I was the variable they couldn't solve, the quiet they hadn't practiced for. Every pause I gave them turned into suspicion. Every look became a trap they set for themselves. They wanted a villain. I gave them a mirror. Someone asked if I was okay. It wasn't concern, it was strategy. Like maybe if they could name the silence, they could diffuse it. But the silence wasn't mine, it was theirs. I just held it up long enough for them to hear it. And once they did, it started digging. Not like a scream, more like rot, slow, internal, personal. They started repeating themselves, circling points, laughing too early, checking each other's eyes. When a room gets scared of itself, it turns against the one thing it can't decode. And that was me, not because I acted strange, but because I stopped performing. And in a world built on noise, not performing is treason. They wanted chaos to feel like freedom. I made it feel like exposure, not by burning the system, just by letting them talk long enough to collapse inside their own sound. By now, they've stopped performing for me. Now they're performing for each other. That's when it gets fun. That's when the desperation turns inward. They don't know who's leading, so they all pretend it's them. And in that vacuum of leadership, chaos doesn't grow. It eats itself. Someone tried to take control. You could hear it in the voice. Too firm, too rehearsed. The others nodded, too fast, too many times. That's how people behave when they're lying to themselves. They want authority, not direction. And I was still in the room, still watching, still smiling. You know what's funny? I never said a word, not one. And yet, I was the loudest thing in the room. Because silence isn't the absence of sound, it's the collapse of meaning. They kept looking at me like I was withholding something, as if I had the script and wasn't sharing. But I wasn't acting, I wasn't holding back. I'd already read the ending. And it didn't need a climax, just an audience that finally realized there wasn't going to be one. They don't fear the chaos anymore. They fear that I'm still calm inside it. They asked for a fire. I gave them a room with no exits. And now they're checking the walls, pretending they knew this was part of the plan. They thought I cracked. That silence was a glitch, not a choice. That I'd eventually erupt like them, noisy, visible, pathetic. But cracks only happen when there's pressure. I wasn't under pressure. I was beneath it. I wasn't breaking. I was sharpening. While they were yelling for attention, I was growing edges, quiet ones, precise, unforgiving. I didn't need chaos. I just stopped hiding in their calm. The funny part? They invited me here. They built the room, filled it with noise, called it control, and then stared when I didn't bow to it. That's when they realized I wasn't part of their plan. I was the consequence of it. I didn't bring fire. I just didn't flinch when the match got dropped. They kept circling, trying to diagnose me. What happened? Where did he go? As if I'd vanished. But I didn't disappear. I appeared. Finally, not filtered, not polite, not small. Just real. The version of me they'd hoped would stay buried under routine, expectation, compromise. He didn't scream. He didn't demand. He just stood and stood and stood. The room isn't afraid of me. It's afraid of what I represent. That someone can be in the middle of the storm and choose not to be moved. That someone can witness chaos and not reflect it, not block it, just absorb it so completely that it loses meaning. That's the part they can't process, that I'm not fighting. I'm done pretending there's something to fight. And if you feel that in your bones, if the silence I carry sounds familiar in your head, then you already know what to do. Subscribe, not for updates, for recognition. You didn't adapt to the noise, you outlasted it. They adjusted. That's the first sign. Not resistance, adjustment. They started rewording their sentences, speaking slower, gauging my expression like it had become a weather report. No more shouting, no more confidence, just careful calibration. They thought I'd join back in if they softened the chaos. But it was never about the noise. It was about what they thought it covered. And now that it's gone, they don't know what to do with the silence that stayed. It's beautiful, really, watching them collapse into civility. Not because they changed, but because they're scared. Scared of saying the wrong thing, of saying too much, of saying anything that doesn't bounce off me and come back unchanged. They still haven't figured it out. I don't reflect. I absorb. And once something enters me, it doesn't echo. It disappears. They tried to include me again. Jokes, comments, fake concern. Like throwing sugar at a ghost. I didn't refuse. I didn't react. I let their words float and die mid-air, untreated, untouched. That's what drives them insane, not rejection, irrelevance. I made their engagement optional. I made their volume optional. I'm not colder, I'm just quieter. And in that quiet, things become clear. Who really runs the room? Who needs the noise? Who falls apart when it stops? I didn't need to dominate them. I just needed to stop responding. That's when the hierarchy rewrote itself, and no one had to say it. They just looked around and knew. And if that's you too, if you've ever sat in the middle of madness and felt calm instead of panic, Now they avoid eye contact. It used to be the opposite. They needed my gaze to validate their presence. But something shifted. Now even a glance from me feels like exposure. Not because I'm judging them, because I'm not. Indifference is heavier than hate. It doesn't burn, it freezes. They think I hold a grudge, that I'm building something in the silence, plotting, waiting. But here's the twist, there's no plan. I'm not building anything, I've already arrived. The storm didn't come from me, I just refused to shelter from it. And that makes me dangerous, not because I attack, but because I don't flinch when others expect collapse. Someone whispered that I changed the atmosphere, as if that wasn't the point, as if the goal wasn't to make noise irrelevant. They still think power is volume. But real power is being the one thing that doesn't need permission to exist. I didn't take control. I absorbed the space until it remembered who it belonged to. They're quieter now, not because they've grown, because they're unsure. Every word feels risky, every laugh artificial. They think I'll strike, but I won't. I already did. The moment I stopped being their reflection, I became their reckoning, and reckoning doesn't argue, it just arrives and stays. If you've ever walked into a room and watched it recalibrate itself around your stillness, they started shrinking, not physically, spiritually. You could see it in the way they entered the room, slower, smaller, voices dipped mid-sentence, eyes darted for safety. The room wasn't loud anymore, it was anxious. A tight, dry kind of quiet, not peaceful, just afraid to echo wrong. They stopped testing me, no more provocations, no more jokes. I became static, fixed in place, but unpredictable, like lightning you know is coming but never lands where it should. I didn't speak, I didn't glare, I didn't move. And somehow that said everything they never wanted to hear. Their power was always dependent on attention. I unplugged that circuit, not with resistance, just by walking out of the current. Now they don't know how to measure themselves. If I'm not reacting, how do they calibrate? If I'm not arguing, how do they validate? The answer is, they don't. They float, unanchored, embarrassed by their own volume. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't a lesson, it was just me, finally choosing not to hold the noise together for them. I was the silence they feared, because it didn't need explanation. It just stared back, and when they saw themselves in it, they didn't like what looked back. I didn't make the room collapse, I just took away the illusion that it was ever stable. And once that truth hit, even standing still became an act of violence. They don't say my name anymore, not directly. I've become a reference, not a person. Don't do what he did. Let's not make that mistake again. They talk around me, like I'm a crack in the wall they hope won't widen. But the crack isn't in the wall, it's in them. I just stopped patching it for them. The space reacts before they do. Meetings end earlier, doors stay open even longer. No one wants to be alone with the silence I left behind. They treat it like residue, like smoke from a fire they don't remember lighting. But I didn't burn the place down, I just stopped holding the ceiling up. Gravity did the rest. They mistake stillness for threat, because to them everything must move, must fight, must explain. But I explain nothing, I justify nothing, I exist like a knife left on the table, untouched, but everyone sees it. And suddenly, no one's hungry anymore. Their system wasn't broken, it was hollow. And the moment I stopped pretending it worked, they all heard the echo, not from me, from the silence they'd been avoiding for years. I didn't raise my voice, I erased the room, and now they're left talking to ghosts they used to call colleagues. They say less now, not out of maturity, out of exhaustion. There's nothing left to spin, no more narratives to sell. The chaos they once weaponized became background noise, and in that noise my silence towered, not louder, taller, unshakable, like a monument built from everything they pretended never happened. I didn't change them, I didn't need to. I showed up, stood still, and let the walls collapse under their own weight. They kept hoping I'd leave, disappear like a bad phase, but I didn't phase out. I phased in, became permanent, not dramatic, just undeniable. And that's worse, because you can argue with anger, you can't argue with presence. Now they measure time differently, not before or after meetings, before me, after me. They don't admit it, but their decisions orbit around the gravity I left behind. They think I poisoned the space. But poison requires intent. I wasn't aiming to destroy anything. I just stopped pretending anything deserved to be preserved. Their chaos wasn't a test, it was a mask. And once I refused to wear mine, the whole thing cracked. What's left now isn't order, it's vacancy, a hollow peace, an unspoken defeat. They'll rebuild, of course, that's what they do, but they'll never do it the same, because even if I never return, the shape of me stays. I didn't finish anything, I just made sure they knew it was never real to begin with. Not the chaos, not the power, not the room, only me.